Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our Milo office hours, our live Q&A session with Rain. We have, I think, one, two, three, four, five different folks online. So we're going to get to all the questions today. But first, I just want to say my name's Elizabeth Leslie, and I've spoken to many of you, but I am the communications manager at the State League and helping direct this project. I'm located in Sacramento. You also may have heard from Amaris Lebron. She's one of our customer service reps and helps does our content migration. So her name might be familiar to you as well. And then we have Rain Michaels on the line, who is our tech guru, if you will, and also just the mastermind behind our whole Milo platform. And will be talking us through the many questions that people have today. So with that, I want to let everyone know that you are in listen only mode right now, but we will be removing that when we begin to ask you questions about what you want to cover today. So again, thank you for joining us here for the MyLeague Online office hours call. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rain. Rain, can you go ahead and take the lead?
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad that you all joined. I know that we've been hearing from some of you on the Google group, and we also been hearing some of you through our ticketing system. So I know that there are a couple of questions that I already have a couple of notes of questions I know are going to come up, and look forward to hearing what you're bringing up. I do want to say that the questions that you bring up in both environments are very helpful, not only for you getting the site that you are trying to set up properly, but also for us in terms of identifying where the user interface can be improved in the product overall, and where we might need more documentation. And it may occasionally seem like we are slow to implement those changes or the documentation, which has to do with resource availability. But we are taking all of the feedback that we get, both through these office hours as well as through the various systems that we have, and we are putting it into a queue so that we can iteratively continue to improve this resource for you. So I thank you for taking the time to bring those questions forward, and also for taking the time to be on this call. So I would like to go ahead and get started by going quickly through the list of attendees and seeing if you could give me a couple of the top level questions that you have, just the most critical ones, and we'll try to get to all of those on this call. It will be recorded, and some of them might be duplicates. So we'll go ahead and do that. I will be jotting them down to try to make sure that we address them as we go throughout this hour. So let's go ahead and start at the top of the list that I have on my GoToWebinar panel, which is Bruce Kendall. If you could give me a sense of a couple of the big questions that you have that brought you to this webinar.
Okay, in previous time, can you hear me, first of all?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I've been previously just an eavesdropper on these things. We hadn't quite done the paperwork, but we're all signed up now, and I've been looking through the documentation. And so this is the question I have is sort of a continuing one, because I've been asking variations of this question on several times before, but it has to do with moving the biggest part of our current website over to the Milo from the Lou, and that is all the archived voters, and it looks like you guys are of split mind in terms of what your recommendations are. And one place it says, well, that doesn't quite fit with our model, so go put it on Google Drive or something like that. But in another place, you've got videos that show explicitly moving it over one by one and into the system. So
yes, okay. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and that's not actually split mind. It's more about being flexible and acknowledging what you need. But I will address what the preferences are, and I think you do bring up a point that we should probably clarify in the documentation the approach that we recommend, and then make sure that it's clear that what we are showing is meant to help you in case you decide to go another route, in case that's best for your league. So we want to acknowledge that sometimes what is best for a specific league is not necessarily what we are trying to shoehorn everyone into for best practices from a technological standpoint. Sometimes the rules need to be broken. So we are very aware of that, and
Well, you
we
seem
designed the system in a way to acknowledge that.
yeah, you seem to have a model of the way you wanted the system to work, where all files are shareable to everybody else, and they're well documented and
Right.
everything else. And something like the voter is not of that kind of a thing. They're all well-known
Exactly.
kind of thing. So it would be nice if your
Exactly.
system. It would be nice if your system had included the older model as well, and that there was a place that could just be treated as a directory that has named files that you could copy them in directly.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that a little bit. Thank you for bringing that one up, and we'll also talk about why it's set up the way that it is to help everyone with thinking about strategy with your files.
Okay.
Do you have another high-level question that you wanted to bring up at this point, or shall we move on to the next on the list?
It looks like I can bend the system to my will, as it were, most of the other
Great.
things, but that particular one is a pain.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, well then let's move on to Helen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm just lurking in the background here. Our organization has just signed up, and I haven't logged into Milo yet or started anything, so I was just going to kind of sit in the background and see what I could gather before I come back with questions next time.
Okay, great. Great. Well, it's good to know that we have someone just getting started on the call. So I'll try to address the questions that come up in a way that are helpful to you as someone who hasn't really entered the system yet as well. And let's move on to the next on the list, which is Liza.
Hi. Our site was migrated over by you guys, and I've been trying to move some pages around and also create a new page and then create a sub page in there or underneath it. And I'm having trouble. I've been able to create the page and the sub page, but it's not showing up.
Oh, okay.
And also then when I go into the page, it's showing up as a draft edit. It's not showing up with the same commands as on the video for editing a page.
Okay, great. We can definitely look at that. Okay. So we'll probably start with that. That makes sense as a good place to start, just in terms of managing your pages and your menu system and the revision system. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, moving on then to the next on the list, which is Roberta.
Yes, one of the questions just came up, I think it was Nick, with the local voters. I had you migrate our information over, and I don't see, our newsletter is called The Local Voter. I don't see any of those. Do you still have them? I don't need them from day one, but at least the last 6 months I'd like to put on my website.
Okay, that is probably a question that we'll have to table for Amarie separately. Okay. Elizabeth, do you are you able to note that so that we can have
I will
Amarie
make a
talk
note
with
of
Roberta
that.
directly?
Thank you so much, Roberta. I will make a note of that. And then when we get off this call, that's something you should follow up with me or Amaris directly, and we will help get you. We have not lost your voters. We still have everything, and we'll make sure what you expected to be there will be there.
Okay,
so we're happy to address that.
It won't be immediately after because I'm on the Eastern.
Oh, no problem. Understood.
So I got dinner delayed as it is, so.
Okay. And Roberta, I know that you were having questions about embed code and placing it nicely on the page. So that's something that I plan to make sure that we discuss on this call.
Yeah, I'm too much in the weeds on that to even get a coherent question about it. So
okay. Well, hopefully we'll at least get you to the point of being able to ask the question that you need to ask. I'll go through that on this call.
Okay.
Great. All right. And then Suzanne, you are the next on the list here.
Okay. I want to put my Google Calendar on
Okay, that's
this.
an embed code question.
Right, I can do the embed code. I did it on our other website, but does it have to be separate? I was looking around at the different websites and I saw that one league did it with in their menu they had calendar and then they had Google Calendar. So do you have to set up as a different page? Or
Oh, that's a really good question. There's kind of a yes, no, it's a completely different topic than you're thinking it is question. So we will go into, we'll make sure to talk about events, how they work, and then
right,
the issues of Google Calendar and how to use them. So we'll definitely,
because that's what I wanted
talk
was
about that.
I like the events, the way they show events,
Mhm.
but I want those to be, highlighted in important events and things. But I
Right.
want, our regular unit meetings and all that stuff just on the Google Calendar, and it makes it easier for me to edit it as well when it's
Okay.
on
Yeah,
our
we'll
master
definitely talk
calendar.
about that. Okay.
Okay.
That's a great question. All right, well, let's start with that. And as questions come up throughout the call, you are certainly welcome to answer them. We will also jot questions down as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Liza's question about pages, because that's sort of a base level question that all of the other questions that we have will come off of. So Liza, you were talking about having difficulty with creating pages, creating a new page, and really understanding why it wasn't showing up or why it was showing up in draft mode. And so I am currently logged in as I'm logged in as a sample user that I have created, and I have a league that I created called Demo Local. This is a fake league, but it is live in production, and it's available on the system just so that there's a resource that people can go to take a look at how some of the setup can work and how that can be structured and how it can look. It's not an ideal looking page. As you can see, there's kind of a lot going on here, but it's more about just showing you what's possible. So as I'm using this, what I can do is I have these pages already set up in my menu. These are pages that are available to be viewed by the public. They are live. And if I go into any one of these pages, now I'm not talking about the question that Liza brought up just yet. Liza brought up a question about creating new pages. I'm going to start by just talking about editing a page and the revision system in Milo, because that is both one of the most useful tools that Milo offers and also one of the most confusing. And we definitely understand and acknowledge that it is confusing, but we wanted to give you this functionality because we felt that it would be really useful to you. So when you edit a page, any page that you go into, if you edit the page, you're not actually immediately editing the page itself. What you are doing is you're creating a draft version of the page that can then be reviewed before it replaces the live version. So right now, if you look at the top here on this particular page, you see view published, and then you see new draft. And then there's another tab that says moderate. And if I click on new draft, this allows me to edit my page. So I can go in here and I can modify this however I would like to. Let's just go ahead and add another paragraph. I forgot to open this little tool that I have. So I'm just going to add another paragraph at the end. I will give it a header so that we can see this formatting happen. All right, so I've just added this paragraph at the end. And if I scroll down now and I click save, what I've done is I've created a new draft. I haven't replaced the production version, meaning the version that the public sees. And you can see this right up here at the top. It says revision state is draft. And I have a tool right here where I can set the state to published, which means that I would then replace the published version. So if I scroll down here, I can see that paragraph that I added with that header. But if I scroll back up to the top and I click on View Published, and then I scroll down to the bottom, it doesn't show me that paragraph. So I won't see that paragraph until I make the current draft public, until I publish it. I can do that under Moderate, or I can also do it under View Draft, where I have this published item right here, and then I can click Apply. If I click on Moderate, now it shows me the version that is publicly visible, which is the green version right here, and it also shows me the draft. And if I entered a log message, which I'll talk about in a minute, when I edited this, then it would show me a log message explaining what the change was, whatever note that I left of the change that I had just made. I can also actually compare versions with each other. There's a tab right here that allows me to compare two revisions. So if you make an edit on your page and it completely blows up and looks horrible, you can compare revisions to see what the differences are between the two pages. So that is hopefully helpful. But the most helpful piece of this, and the reason why we provided this functionality, even though it is a little bit confusing, is that it gives you the opportunity to see the history of the page, to revert it, and also to see who made that change, so that if there's some kind of a problem or confusion, you know who to go to ask questions about what happened or why it happened. And you can also see when those changes were made. So this is meant to be a really strong way to keep track of the material that you are putting out publicly for your members and for the public. Now, the reason why I spent time talking about this in a current page rather than in terms of a new page is because it's important to remember that all content, when you start working on it, starts in draft mode. So it's not published, and therefore it's not available to the public. So until you publish your draft, there will not be a public version of it that the public can access. So let me click on View Draft, or sorry, not View Draft. I'm going to click on Edit Draft here again. And this time I'm going to make one more change. Let me go back up to the body here. And I'm going to make one more change. I'm just going to add another paragraph. And the reason why I'm doing this is because now I want to show you the log message functionality. I'll scroll down to the bottom here, and then under Publishing Options, if I click on that, you're going to see two things that are really kind of important for managing the revisions on your page. One is that you can, right here, you can leave a note about the change that you're making. And that note can help with the history and understanding why certain changes were made. For example, if you're changing a phone number, let's say that somebody updates their phone number and you go in and you change that phone number and that's the only change that you make. It might be a good idea to leave that note, because if you come back the next day and you see that the page is looking, it just looks weird. Maybe the formatting accidentally got messed up when you changed the format, when you changed the phone number. You might revert the page to a previous version without remembering that you changed a phone number. And then you lose that phone number change. So the revision logs are very helpful in terms of keeping track of why you may have made a change to a page. So that's one thing that you have here. The other thing that you have here is you can, at this moment, take your edits directly to live. So rather than going to draft, which is what happens by default, you can actually go ahead and make your change and take it directly to published by changing the moderation state under Publishing Options before saving this particular page. And this is also true when you're creating brand new content. If you're creating a new piece of content and you know you want it public immediately and you don't want it to go into a draft version, you can go ahead and choose published under moderation state before you save that page. So now my change is published. It is the live version. You have view published and then new draft. And if I click on moderate here, you'll see the note that I left in that revision log. So now let's take all of that information over to creating a brand new piece of content. So if I go to my, let me scroll down here, my Administer League menu, I can create new content. So I'll go ahead and add a page. What is today, the 4th webinar. And I'll go ahead and add a fair bit of content here. So now I'm creating a brand new page. And as I'm doing this, I have a number of options available to me that are part of documentation. There's a lot of help text, and you can certainly ask more questions about it. They might come up on this call. But I'm going to stick to the questions that are specific to this call so far. So down here under publishing options, I have those same options available. You won't see this because you're only part of one league, so you can go ahead and ignore that. It will automatically tell content to be part of your league, but my fake user here is part of 2 leagues. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it in the moderation state of draft to default and save it. So I've now created a brand new piece of content, and it's a draft piece of content. Now, I do have the opportunity to take this to production to make it the published version right up here or under the Moderate tab, and I can do that. But the confusion, one of the pieces of confusion here is, since it's not published, the public can't see this piece of content, which means that it can't be visible in your menu system. Even if you go back into the content and you scroll down here, now that the content's been created, you can now, if you want, put it into your menu system in some way. So go ahead and do that. And even if I do this, it's still nowhere to be found in my menu system. So it looks like the page isn't there. And for all intents and purposes, it actually isn't because it's not published. The only way that I can get to it if I don't know the direct URL, oops, I need to go back to my landing page here, is to go to my Manage Content menu. And under Manage Content, I'll be able to find that page, and I will also see there's this published column here. I will see that it's not actually published. By the way, there's yet another way. There are so many ways that you can publish your content. There's yet another way that you could actually take this to published without even going to the content itself directly from this screen here, which is to check the little checkbox next to it. And then under Operations up here, you can choose Publish and then click Execute. And it will ask you to confirm, do you actually want to go ahead and publish this? Yes or no. So if I go ahead and publish this piece of content, then it will show up. I guess it didn't actually ask me to confirm. But at that point, it will show up in your menu system. There it is right there. So once it's published, then it will be in the menu system. But until it's published, it will only display in your Manage Content system. There are questions about that at this point? I see a question from Bruce.
Yeah, in previous times when we've done this, everybody was unmuted, so you were going on with a monologue, and there was no way to interrupt you to to ask. So there's several issues. Given the fact that you know that you've introduced this level of confusion, why didn't you come up with some other method to make it look like it's semi there to people who are editing the page instead of hiding everything?
So that's a really good question. We're providing a huge amount of functionality with Elizabeth, you can stop me or jump in as you would like to add anything, but with a very limited budget. So that's one of the reasons why we're continuing to improve the user experience and make this better. but we're constantly making choices about which features to provide and which level of complexity to offer, while also trying to make sure that it's as usable as possible. So that's one of the reasons also that we're offering these webinars, as well as the documentation that we're putting together, because we're basically trying to provide a very substantial amount of functionality and things that we know have been used, will be used, and will be useful to people, while also being aware that that introduces a fair amount of areas where people might need a little bit of extra assistance. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Okay, there's several related questions to this. First of all, suppose you had already published the page and then done some drafts like that. There's that issue of, if you unpublish it, will it go back to the previous version or something like that? Now presumably it will show on the left menu because you published it once. So
right. Well, when you can unpublish the page if you would like to. You would do that through the Manage Content menu. So you can go to Manage Content. You can also do it through Moderate. There's two ways that you can do it. One is under Manage Content. You can select any published page, and then you can choose to unpublish it. And then if you do that, it will also remove it from the menu. It will store all of the versions that you've created. Those will still be available under the Moderate page. So you'll still have access to those. But you can use this to unpublish it. You can also unpublish it through the Moderate page itself by clicking Unpublish. And again, it'll still store all of the versions, but this then will take it out of the menu and make it unpublished, so now the public doesn't see it anymore.
So to summarize, I think what the implication is if I have generated several drafts of this page and published it, so there's a history, and I decide the one I just did was a big screw up, and I have to explicitly unpublish it and republish the earlier published version.
No. So if you look at this screen right here, there's a revert link on any of the old versions. So you could view an old version, and if you decide that you like that version, then you would revert to that version.
But it requires an explicit operation, and instead of the fact if you unpublish the current one, that'll default to the previous one.
If you unpublish, then the system understands that you decided that this particular piece of content shouldn't be public anymore.
Okay. There's one related question. This is a kind of esoteric.
Let me clarify, you don't have to unpublish in order to revert. You can revert while you have something else published, and what that will do is it will unpublish the published version and publish the version that you're reverting to all in one go.
Yeah, okay. I've got a related kind of esoteric question, but on Lou, it seemed like when you were in the editing mode, the kind of like the network path to that page was different from what happens when it finally gets published, and so sometimes you couldn't quite view the page without in fact publishing it. You couldn't see it in the preview mode. Does this system have that same attribute?
So the only difference between a published version and an unpublished version of the page is if we go ahead and view this draft right now, this looks exactly like what your final content will look like, except for the pink. That I don't know if you can see it. It's very pale, but I don't know if in the webinar you can see it. You'll see it when you're looking at your content on your own site. There will be a pink background behind the content. So if when you want to take a look at your content, you can save it in the draft form, and as long as it's in the draft form, you're looking at what it will actually look like for the public when you turn it into the published form. The only difference being that for something that is unpublished, that there's no public version of that particular piece of content, you'll see the pink behind it.
Yeah, I don't know if you understood my question exactly, but let's go.
Yeah, I did. You were asking if there was a way to preview. And that is how you preview. So as
Yeah.
you're working on your content, you save it, and then you look at that draft version.
Okay. Like I was trying to explain this kind of esoteric thing, which may be different in these two systems, and I'm trying to find out which. In the Loo, when you do the preview mode, there was some kinds of content you could have on the page which was maybe self-referential or had links that it wouldn't quite work right because the page that you were viewing in the preview mode had a different network path than the one that it is when it's published.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand what you're asking. So that's one of the fundamental differences with this system from Loo. And this is, we're using Drupal as the content management system, the framework that's behind the system. And for Drupal, when you are working with content, you are working with it in the same location. There's not a difference between the administrative environment versus the front end environment. They're all integrated. So if you want to edit the page, you literally go to the page and you click to edit that particular page.
Okay.
So all of that self-referential stuff, that's all going to happen in the environment that you're looking at initially. But what gives you the ability to edit in the front end is by logging in as yourself.
Okay, so it's a matter of hidden flags that are controlling how it operates.
It's a matter of user permissions, really.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you the user that has the permission to take these actions on this item or not?
Okay. Another
and
quick
if you
question.
are, then you can see those tools. Yeah.
Another quick question related to preview. In some of your example pages that you have on videos like that, when you're talking about dropping in HTML, things like that, all the examples you used, you immediately went to publish to view it like that. Would it have looked okay if you just left it in draft mode? Would you see the HTML?
Yes,
active?
it would. No, that's a really good question, a really valid question. It would. I just have it because I do this so often. I have a bit of confidence about how things will look. So I, out of habit, will typically, and when I'm demonstrating something, will typically go straight to published. And I have to remind myself to go to draft first if that's what I'm trying to demonstrate.
Okay.
So that's why you were seeing that. It's just a matter of behavior, habitual behavior.
Okay, and Rain, I'm going to jump in here because I see Liza O'Reilly has her hand up, and I'm hoping that her question may have to do with what we were just discussing. So I'm going to unmute her, and then I'd like to add just a couple more comments about the permission system that we created to address sort of some of the higher level questions that Bruce had. But first, Liza, share with us what your question is.
Okay, so I went ahead when I created my new page, I did publish it. And then I go back to my home page and I click on the new page on the menu, and it brings me back to the My League Online homepage.
Okay.
Instead of to the actual page I created.
Okay, that's a really good question. So Liza, I'm going to masquerade as you, just to assuage any concerns that might come up from seeing me do what I'm about to do. Only Amrit, Elizabeth, and I have the privilege to do what I'm doing right now, which is pretending that I'm another person. So right now I'm logged in as if I'm you, Liza. So I'm going to use this to go ahead and take a look specifically at the item that you are referring to. So if you can tell me which page to look at.
From where you are. The fourth
Okay,
one
can you start over again? I think you were muted for a moment when you started talking.
So if you click on the two things I have questions about is voter calendar and then town meeting and local elections. So click on voter calendar.
Okay. So I can already tell what's going to happen. I don't know if you can see this, it's probably really tiny, but I moused over voter calendar, and in the bottom left-hand corner, it gives the URL for my.lwv.org.
Yep, I see that.
So I know that that's going to take me to the to the Milo landing page. So that's one that's an issue. So we'll look at that one. And what's the other one?
So then on, this is sort of a different question, but on town meeting and local elections, one
Okay.
down. So click on that.
Okay.
Okay. So I created these two new subpages, candidates night and town meeting. And then
Yep.
when I click on those, it goes to there too.
Okay. Okay. So my first question for you, let's talk about the subpages first. How did you create each of these pages? Well, let me just ask that question without trying to lead you. How did you create these pages?
Those two new pages, I did it below with the add pages.
Okay. And then how did you put them into the menu?
I went into the manage menu and I put them in with the weighting.
Okay. So my guess is that when you went into manage menu and put them in, the link that you put in might not have been quite correct. So we'll look at that in a moment. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to.
It's not live yet. I don't know if that makes a difference.
No, that's not the issue. So I'm going to go to your content first, and we're going to go to those two pages. One was town meeting, correct? And candidates night, are those the two?
Yeah, those two are the subpages that I want. I want them to be subpages.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and edit candidates night.
Okay.
We'll just do this with this one. So one thing that you might not have known was an option is you don't actually have to go into manage menu to place your link. You can go into manage menu and put it in manually, but then you have to make sure that you have exactly the right URL when you put it in there. If you don't want to have to worry about the URL and you want to just have the system take care of it for you, then when you're editing the page itself, there's a menu settings tab here at the bottom, and you can click on provide a menu link.
Okay.
And then under here, you can tell it where, and this actually might not be the right one, but we'll place it anyway, and then you can, since it's not live, you can adjust it as you see fit. So then you'll choose the parent item, the item that it should be a sub item for.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to take this directly to published to make this change. And in this case, I'm doing it intentionally because I want it to be in the menu system. And unpublished versions aren't in the menu system. So I'm taking it directly to published for that reason. Okay, so now if we go back to your menu and click on town meeting and local elections, candidates night overview has been added to your menu system here.
Okay.
So that is an easier way for you to place your links because then you don't have to know the exact URL correctly.
Okay.
Now, the ones that are not working correctly, we'll look at voter calendar. So voter calendar, is that meant to link to the page that was automatically created for your site? Or is that meant to link to another page that you created?
It's a new page that I created.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to go back to your content, your manage content page, and I'm going to look for voter calendar in here.
Okay.
And what I want to do is I want to find the actual URL for this page. So I could add it to the menu the way that I just showed you, but what I'm going to do here is just get that URL and add it to the menu the way that you did by manually managing the menu. So what I'm going to grab for the URL, and I always use copy and paste, I'm going to grab everything after my.lwv.org because I want this to be a relative URL, not an absolute URL. And what that means, an absolute URL is everything. including the top level domain. And this is what you want to use anytime you're using an external, linking to something external. But anytime you're linking to something internal, you want the relative URL. So that's going to be everything after the top level domain. So I'll take that, I just copied that. And now I have actually two different ways that I can get into the menu to manage it. I don't know if you found this on your own, but just in case you didn't, I will show you both. So let me scroll back up here. So I'll go back home. I have this link right here under Administer League. And then I also, which says Manage Menu, if it's a little bit small for you to see. I also, however, can get to exactly the same thing. I apologize, my dog is going to bark. I can get to exactly the same thing by going under List Links right here. If I mouse over my menu at the top right corner, I get a little gear icon. And by mousing over that, I can click on it and I can click on List Links. And that takes me to exactly the same thing that the Manage Menu link from my Administer League menu takes me to. From here now, I can go ahead and add a link, or I can edit one of these links. And since this link isn't actually going to the destination I want it to go to, what I'm going to do is under Past, right now it's linking to Front, which is going to take you to the My League Online homepage. And that's not what I want. What I want is for it to link to this URL right here. And then I'll go ahead and save that. And now that link should work correctly. And it does.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
That path thing was really confusing. I couldn't figure out what that meant. And I looked in the glossary. So you might want to make a note of that, of explaining that to people.
Okay. So making a note right now. So I do want to make sure that it's clear, though, that the easier way for you to add things to your menu, unless they're external links, is to do so on the page itself. You have a little bit more control that way. And this is a nicer way. It's just kind of an easier way for you to do this. Okay. Okay. So, Liza, I hope we addressed your question about revisions and pages and subpages and where you can access your content. I'm going to move on with time considerations because I do want to get to some of these other questions. I'm going to move on to the embed code, which I know is something that Roberta has been handling, and it's also relevant to Suzanne's question about Google Calendar, and I'd like to make sure that we talk about events and how that's structured. So, embed code. I need to make sure that I'm not pretending to be Liza anymore. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to switch back to my admin account. And then I'm going to go ahead and masquerade as Rainbow Bright again. Okay. So, all right. So now that I'm, and now if I want to embed something, I have a sample page here in Demo Local. And this is a sample page that has a huge amount of embed code on it. And the embed code I used was from Twitter, but that's not really entirely relevant where it comes from. It's just a matter of where you place that embed code. So the first part of this is embed code comes from a third-party tool. So it might come from Google if you want to embed your Google Calendar. It might come from YouTube if you're going to embed a YouTube video. It might come from Eventbrite if you're putting on an event registration form. Or it might come from PayPal or Google Checkout or something if you're trying to make use of this to provide some kind of an embedded form for donation processing or membership dues. So the way that it works is when you are creating any piece of content, let me scroll down here, and I'll just do a page. And I'll type that in. All right, so I have this body area at the top, which is the top area. I can fill it out however I want. I'm just going to put a paragraph in there. I'm going to select that paragraph and I'm going to style it with special introductory paragraph styling, just to make this look a little bit more interesting. And then let me put in a so I'm just going to put a header in here. And now that's the beginning of my page. Let me go ahead and save that. I need to tell it which group to be part of. I'm going to go ahead and save this. This is the beginning of my page. And I left that special styling on the header as well, but that's irrelevant. So I have the opening, and then after this, I want to embed something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and find a YouTube video because that's a pretty easy one. YouTube, let's do OWC Education Fund, and just grab something from there. All right, we'll do best practices for developing a voter guide. So any third-party system that you might make use of to grab embed code from has a different way of providing that embed code. And that's going to be specific to that system. There will be help documentation in that tool for how to grab that embed code, but it's going to be different on each system. On YouTube, it's this share button right here under the video. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And why are you? Okay, there we go. So it was giving me problems initially for some reason. Under share, then there's this link right here, embed. And if I click on that, now I have this code that I can copy. So I will select that code. There's also a copy link right here. And I have some options that I can choose if I want to. So I will copy that code into my clipboard. And then I can go back to my page. I'm going to edit the draft. And then what I'm going to do is scroll down here, and I have these extra, underneath the body, I have extra buttons here to add embed code in the middle. And then I can layer that with additional formatted text and additional embed code. Now, the reason why these are separate buttons is because when you add embed code, it needs to be pure HTML, which isn't going to give you the nice visual editor at the top, which gives you buttons to make things bold or italic, and it won't give you any of the media tools. It won't give you any of that. You're just pasting pure HTML code into this area. So you only want to use it for that HTML code. Everything else you want to put into the body above, and then any additional formatted text blocks that you want to place. So if I now have an additional block that I want to put following the video, I can do that. Let's do another header. And then I'll go ahead and save this. Okay, so the other thing that I want, that I'm intentionally showing you, is when I first save this, there's this gap where I know that video is supposed to be, but the video doesn't show up. The first time you save the embed code, it's not in the cache system, which is a technical term, but it's not in the system that's actually brought stuff into the page. So you actually need to reload. You only need to do this once, but you actually wouldn't necessarily need to do it because the second person who comes to the page, it would reload for them, but you probably want to do it because you want to see what it looks like. So if you reload your page, which browsers all have this little refresh button somewhere, or it'll be under one of these menus. I don't use the menu system often to reload a page, so I don't actually know where it is. But and on Windows it's Control R, on Mac it's Command R, and those are your key commands. So you can reload the page, and then that embed code will show up. So that's how you place embed code on a page. You can place as much embed code as you like. I recommend as many different embed snippets. There's one league that I think has about 12 different YouTube videos embedded on one page. I do recommend that if you embed multiple items, that you use separate paragraphs, these are called paragraphs, that's the technical term for them, for your embed code. So each YouTube video or each PayPal form would be a separate entity on this page. So let's go ahead and find another video, and we'll use this. Embed, copy, there we go. Paste that, and I'll go ahead and save this. And then I'm going to reload so that it actually shows up. And there it is. So these are separate paragraphs that I can move around later if I want to. And this just makes it easier, especially if there's an error in one of them, then the others I know are fine, and I can just go ahead and target the one that's giving me problems. So that's how adding the embed code to your page works. Obviously, getting the right embed code from the third-party tool is separate, but you can add the embed code using those options that are on the page itself. And that's just, under the body. So you would really only, in this case, put the introduction into the body, and then you would scroll down and make use of these buttons right here to start adding these elements. Now, the other nice thing about these elements is that there's these little grabby handles, and the body will always be at the top, but these other ones, you can reorder them if you want to. So you can drag them up and down to reposition them. So I've just moved that formatted text one to the bottom, and now the two YouTube videos are right next to each other. And I can go ahead and save that as well.
Rain, we have a few questions. So I'm
Okay,
going to
great.
start with the two folks that asked directly about the embed codes. So let's start with, I'm going to unmute Roberta and then Suzanne, and I think that's the only questions, or maybe Liza has one too, but we'll start with Roberta. So go ahead, Roberta.
Yes, where I've been having problems with embed code is linking PayPal, whether it's join now or donate. Got donate kind of situated, but okay, I understand how to put the embed code into the page. How do I link it to like the red donate button that's on like the sidebar? If there isn't.
How do you have this donate button right here?
Yeah.
Go to that PayPal page?
Right.
Okay. That's a great question that we covered in depth in the previous webinar.
Okay.
So given where we are with time, Elizabeth, do you have a record of where that is in that previous webinar?
I think I do. I'm happy to try to retrieve that and send that link to Roberta. I've made a notation of that here that she needs to know about linking in the sidebar.
Okay.
Great.
Or vice versa, however you do it. I'm not sure which comes first.
Sure, it's a very common question. So thank you for asking it. Do you want me to move on to Suzanne?
Code, one thing I do want to say first is that the PayPal embed code itself is a unique element that you're not going to modify. So what PayPal gives you, that is what it is. You can't mess with that, because if you do, that will not, your PayPal forms won't work. So you're taking, when you're taking embed code from a third party, you are just taking that snippet and you're not changing that. There is a way to get this donate button to link to something else. And that's covered in the previous webinar, and we will be creating some solid documentation on that as well. But but the PayPal button itself needs to be left intact as is.
I've
So,
unmuted Suzanne, so Suzanne can ask her questions that are related to the embed code. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Elizabeth. Okay, no, I didn't have any problems with the embedding. I'm having problems with the page that I'm trying to embed. And on mine, it's shown as calendar. And then when I click on that, I get the event that I added, but then I guess I don't get any edit draft, or can I add the embed code to that page as well? I don't know why I can't get there. I did manage content. When I go to manage content, I don't get the list. So
yes. Okay, no, you're asking a great question. So you're moving us on to your events question, which is important. I just want to make sure that embed code, that there's no more questions about embed code.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to your question.
No.
Okay, great. Okay, so you're actually asking about this pre-created link. There are a couple of links that are pre-created for the Milo sites as they're created that are lists of content. So Action Alerts is one of those. There's no Action Alerts in the Demo Local League. Articles is one of them. Positions is one of them. And this is for specific content types that are on the system. And then Calendar is made up of content that's the events content. These are not actually pages, which is why you don't see the edit tabs up at the top. So to answer your question, yes, you are absolutely correct. You cannot, on your own, have that embed code show up on that specific page. Now, we can, I can do some overrides for your league, and I can put some embed code into a block that's specific to your league and then force that to show up on these pages. But these pages as they are not editable. Does that help start to answer your question? And then we can talk about how events work and go on to what you were asking about setting up the kind of setting up the calendar and events the way that you want to set them up.
Yeah, I've got another follow-up question to that though. Now I could add a page then and then just do my embedding of my Google Calendar in that page. And then
Correct.
Because I'm thinking maybe that the menu bar, again, we should change it to events instead of calendar. I'm confused but our membership, I think, will look for calendar on the webpage because that's what they're used to.
Right.
So what if I had events as maybe I should have it as a separate thing. I might add it as a separate menu item then. I'm sorry. I'm getting you to figure out my
No. This is good. This is good because other people are going to have similar questions because people kind of want to force the system to do what they need it to do.
Yeah, I think I will then just make a separate page just for well, that's the thing. If I put my Google Calendar on a separate page, then do you have to do something to change my menu to calendar?
No, you can do it. So what I do want to kind of talk to is some of the ideas that you're working through right now, how they're going to impact you and how you might strategize with them. So for the sake of everyone who's on the call, we'll talk a little bit about events and Google Calendar and why events work the way that they are. So events are what's called a content type on the system. They're a special type of content, and when you add an event, you want to add it as add event. And they are available through an RSS feed. So there's an RSS feed. This little icon here gives you a feed for all of the events for a specific league, and that feed can be provided to other organizations if they want to automatically have your events show up in their site. They would just use that to grab those events and pull them into their site automatically. So it makes your events syndicatable. Using the event content type also makes it possible for you to place your events on your homepage as well.
Did that. Yeah.
So yeah, so right now, so using Google Calendar doesn't give you those tools. You're not able to have a Google Calendar event show up in your list of content featured on your front page, and you're not able to, you can. Some people are able to take Google Calendar content and syndicate it, but it's actually a little bit more difficult than an RSS feed. So, and your events won't be available for the content sharing that's part of the overall Milo system. But that being said, there are a lot of reasons why you might want to do both, and Suzanne's brought up a very key reason why you might want to have both a Google Calendar and also have events on your system, which would be you use Google Calendar for kind of the housekeeping, and then you use the event content type for events that you really want to highlight or feature in some kind of way. So what Suzanne's dealing with is trying to come up with the best way to have both, to have the Google Calendar there, make the Google Calendar probably the primary thing that people are going to see, and then have the featured events show up in a way that is clear that those are featured events. So what my recommendation in your case would be is to decide to actually make them separate pages, as you were just kind of coming to your own conclusion on, and have the one that's Google Calendar, actually call it Google Calendar as the name, and I would use Google Calendar.
Somebody
and
else.
then, but then you can have the menu link can just say calendar, and then change the menu link for calendar to featured events. And you can do that by simply editing. Let me go here. I'll list links on this, and then I'll scroll down to calendar, and I'm just going to change the link to featured events so that you can see how that works. It's just a visual change. So now if I go back to demo local, it says featured events instead of calendar.
Got it. So I can do that without screwing anything
Yeah.
up. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you are, for your league, you're exactly what I am as Rainbow Bright for this league. And just since this is the sample, I'm just going to change that back to calendar. Now, the one thing that's really important that I do need to make sure that you're aware of is, before you do this, is when you do this, the URL for this particular auto-generated page, which is a list of content, is your league, state, local, and then calendar. And it needs to remain that, because if it doesn't, that's how this list knows to show up. It's actually figuring out what events to display rather than just showing any random leagues events. It's figuring that out and figuring out who owns that based on the URL that's up there. So when you create your new page that's going to contain your Google Calendar, when you create it, don't just call it calendar, because if you do, the URL is going to be calendar. And there's no, this right here, this list is not actually a real page. It doesn't actually exist as a page. This is a query, an auto-generated query that's placed in your menu. So you won't want to create a page called calendar, because if you do, then this page won't exist anymore for you. And that's easy to fix. If you do that, and if you make that mistake, it's not a big deal. That's really easy to fix. And I can help you fix that really quickly. But it's just a kind of a warning for you to be aware of that.
So to reiterate, then calendar has to have the same link. You can't change that link.
You can change the words. No, you can change the words in the link. This is just a visual, but not the URL at the top. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think I can do that.
You can do
So
it,
I know we're a little
Suzanne.
bit over.
I'm sorry.
I know we're a little over
overwhelmed.
time. We haven't addressed Bruce's question yet about media. I know we've talked about it a lot. Elizabeth and those on the call, do we have a couple minutes to talk about that, or should we go on to other questions?
Let me just check in with Liza, who has had her hand up for a while, and I'm not sure if that's on purpose or not. So let me just check with her to see if she has a relevant question, and then maybe we can reassess. Liza, did you have a question related to what
No,
Rain was discussing?
I never lowered my hand, so sorry.
Okay, great.
And
Okay.
I'm gonna sign off. I have to go shovel snow. I'm in Massachusetts, so we're
Good
getting
luck to
Oh, good
you.
luck.
Good luck to you,
Good luck.
Liza.
still huge. But thank you very much. You really helped, and I'll get back on again with more questions. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Liza.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
And Suzanne, I see she has her hand up again. Suzanne,
Yes.
did you put your hand up again?
No, I thought I put it down.
Okay, that's okay. I
But
just
no,
wanted
I
to
have other questions, but I can ask them through the Google group.
Okay, well, we might
Or
be able
whatever
to
we're
get to
using.
them. I just wanted to answer a couple quick questions of Bruce, and then that Bruce had raised, and then we will open it up again for those that can stay. I wanted to mention something about the design, the back-end design that we decided upon. Bruce, you were asking about why the moderation and all of this, and part of that was done out of user design. So we had beta testers go through this, and everyone obviously were league members that participated in that. And so we arrived at this revision and draft model because so many different people were working on websites that they needed to be able to keep track of these various versions. So that was the most effective way for us to do that. However, including that particular format, as well as other feature designs that you would like to see us either change, add on to, or implement in a different manner, is we are always taking feature requests. So if there are enhancements that you would like to see, please tell us about them, or things that you think could work better. You guys are the users, and we are really dedicated to making sure that this works for people. So as we go along, obviously we've just launched Milo, but we're already collecting lots of different comments from people and requests from people about these features. So feel free to email us if you say, hey, I'd like to see this in the future. And the more requests we get, obviously we're going to, put out to the groups, these are the feature requests we have received. Who would like to vote on these? Do we have consensus? And we'll see how, based on our budget restrictions, how we can move forward and make these feature requests possible as people start utilizing Milo even more. So with that, I see two more hands are raised. Helen has her hand raised again, and Bruce is still here. So I'm actually going to unmute everyone because there's just 3 of us left here for those that are able to stay on and have time to do so. So Helen, did you have another question?
I did have a quick question about, maybe quick, in the embed code where you were embedding YouTube videos and the full-size image was showing, can you do a thumbnail instead? You mentioned one site had 12 videos, and I'm just thinking of 12 full-size images versus thumbnails of.
No, so yeah, you can embed whatever size video you want to. You make those choices when you are choosing when you're choosing the embed code. Those are some of the parameters that you can
Okay, thank you.
choose at that point. But in the case of what you're talking about, I might recommend that you think about linking to the YouTube video separately, you might play with it. There might be a number of different ways to approach that. It really depends on what you're putting on the page. But here under embed, you have a bunch of options, and they've actually changed their UI here. So they used to. This is brand new. This is the last time I looked at it, but maybe it's. Okay, so I guess they've changed their UI, but you used to be able to change the size right here. Yeah.
I'll figure it out.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Bruce, did you have
Suzanne
other
Kim.
questions for us?
Going back to my initial problem, looking at what I think is going to be the biggest hassle for me is doing well, and was getting the old calendar into the old voter stuff into the new system. In the if I don't have a way of kind of like block copying all those files, it's going to be a big pain.
Let's actually talk about that, Bruce. So since we didn't get to that, and I know that's something that a lot of people are faced with making a decision of what to do. So essentially, you were able to use Lou previously to put up a bunch of files for your voter newsletter. And that was available because at the time that Lou was created, there really was no other option for storing files. But the reality at this point is that there are significantly better tools for file sharing than a website. A website is not really an ideal system for providing access to an archive of files, or basically a directory of files. And so that's why, while we have the tools for you to upload and share your files in Milo, what we're actually recommending to you for things like the voter newsletter is to decide if you want to use Dropbox or a Google Drive folder. It doesn't really matter. There are free options that you can make publicly available for people to be able to view. They wouldn't be able to edit, they'd just be able to view. And
it's a comment. That's not as easy as it sounds for a block. Unless they've changed things since the last time I looked at those things, the URLs that you get in order to access those things are complicated IDs. You have to individually go and make it fetch, because they don't look like straight URLs normally. They go through a complicated system to access them inside their Dropbox or things like that. So for doing a bulk generation of all the old references like that is going to take a long time, because I'm going to do it one at a time. Whereas if they were addressed,
systems,
yes,
both of those systems actually have embed code options, so you can embed the directory into your page if you wanted to go that route. My recommendation would actually be to just link to the directory. So instead of linking to the files individually, to link to the directory as a whole, and because it ends up being a layout that more sophisticated users would be able to go in and say, oh, I want all of these, so I'm going to sync this, or I want to download this as a zip file. And then other users who just kind of want to browse, they can just browse through them. But you can, so you can link out to that as opposed to listing them in your on your page one at a time. You can also grab embed code from those tools to a specific directory, so that that directory is embedded on your page.
Okay,
and then all the files are linked there.
I'm not sure if we're talking in different directions, or something that I don't know, which is probably both are true. But the last time I tried to link to things that were, I forgot whether it was Google Docs or Google Drive like that, that the actual URL to access those things was not what you would have thought, when looking at it normally. Yes. That you had to go through some complicated thing, and they had their own ID, and it was a real long URL to get it.
Yes. So let me repeat what you said, so that you are sure that I understand what you're saying. You're concerned about the long, confusing URLs that come from both Google and Dropbox for the specific files that you might link to directly. So if you were to make those links direct links on the page itself, let's actually just kind of pretend like we're doing this here. I'll create a new draft, and just right here, link to a file, link to a file, link to a file. Now let's say I wanted each of these three things to be linked to something from Google Drive, and I just wanted to do them one at a time. So to grab that link, I need to go to, let's just do this, drive.google.com. I'm not sure, something personal might come up, so please forgive that. Let's see if I can find something right here. I didn't prepare to kind of show off my space here. So I'm not sure what's private or not. Let's
I'm not
go
sure
with
you can
this.
answer the question directly, but the
No, please let me
Okay.
let me try to answer the question. Thank you. Okay, so if I wanted to share one of these files, all right, here's my headshot. That's nice and safe, right? So if I wanted to share this link directly, or if I wanted to share, let's just share this. If I wanted to share this file right here, I would go under share, and then it gives me this long, crazy link. As you said, it's kind of this long, confusing link. So I would have to take that and then go back to the page itself, and then I'd go to link, and then I would paste that long URL, right? So it's kind of a long, ugly, not so pleasant URL, and that's absolutely the case. So that is obviously something that's kind of a concern. That's not actually ideal. The other thing that you could do is you could link to, let's go back to this, you could link to this folder. So right here on this folder itself, I could click on get a shareable link, and then I could choose that. Now this is also a long ID, as you said. But if I use that, then I link to the whole folder. Let's say, link to file, link to voter newsletter archive. Now, if the user clicks on this, then they would open up the archive as a whole, and then they would be able to navigate through this folder themselves, however they chose to.
That's assuming that your files were named nicely and they know what they mean by looking at the file names.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
which you really want to do anyway for any files that you're trying to provide in some kind of an archive version.
Yeah, just kind of thinking of the way I was planning on doing it, thinking the system was not designed differently. I was going to extract all the files from my Lou onto a local drive in my computer first, so I had control over them. And then I was going to find some way to bulk copy them back onto your site or some other site. And then I would write a little script, a local script that would generate all the HTML or whatever necessary to view it on the page. So I wouldn't have to go as a scaling problem one at a time and deal with the names, one at a time, deal with the names. And I would generate the embedded code, as it were, that would display it. And if I tried to do it from the one at a time thing on the Google Drive, for instance, there's no way to deduce from one of those file names what the next one's going to be. Their IDs are generated by themselves automatically. So that was a pain. So your second suggestion is yes, go.
Yeah, you have another option. I mean, it sounds like linking to the folder itself, if you're going to use Google Drive or Google Drive or Dropbox. It sounds like that would probably be a better option for you, or to use the embed code might be a better option. But the other option that you have, and you would need to talk with Elizabeth about this because this would require a little bit of time from the Milo team. So I don't know how she would want to handle that. But you could pull all of those files into a zip file and give it to us, and then we can upload that zip file, upload the contents of that zip file into a directory for you. At that point, then those files would be, we could give you the URL, the path where those files were, and then you would be able to do that as well. That, again, Elizabeth would need to talk to what that means in terms of resource management. and working with you. So
And it
that
didn't
is
sound
another
like
possibility, though.
it didn't sound like that's the way you wanted to use your system of having people load a lot of those kind of things that are globally shareable because of the way you want to do things instead of just locally shareable.
Right. It's better. It's better not to use a website for a document archive. So that's why, you know, there's other tools for document archives that are far superior at this point, and that those did not exist when Lou was set up. So Lou had to solve a problem that didn't exist. But now there are better tools and preferable tools for people to make use of for document archives, and that's why Milo is trying not to be a document archive, because we would spend so many resources trying to make that document archive usable and not making the other tools more friendly. So that's a consideration that is being made.
Hey, Bruce, I have a question for you. I know that you have brought up that it might have been confusing when we were first presenting the way we are suggesting and that the best practices used for PDFs. So I just wanted to highlight two things for you. One, yes, we do recommend wherever possible, you kind of step away from PDFs. They're just not accessible for people. They're not mobile friendly. And they're a little bit hard to deal with as far as this storage issue. However, that said, we fully understand and have heard from Leagueland that leagues love their PDFs. So we understand that. And so the reason why we don't allow for this bulk upload of PDFs is because your PDFs are actually searchable on your site, which is not the case in Lou or most sites. But because we understand the need for these PDFs, when you upload a PDF, it does ask you lots of questions and details and description and alt text and meta tags. And that's all for the purpose so that people can find your information. Because I think we all know in Leagueland, we do a great job at talking to ourselves, and we don't do a great job at talking to everybody outside of League. So we really have to keep that in mind. Why are we creating this? What are we doing this for? What is the ultimate goal? So in your case, if this is all about newsletters, I do have concerns that you're spending a lot of time, you know, archiving lots and lots of old newsletters. I would really challenge you to perhaps take a look and say, you know, how many people need a newsletter from over a year ago? You know, on one hand, from a historical perspective, I totally understand wanting to keep that and developing some sort of system for archiving or storing in Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever you decide. But as far as the newsletter options, I do think that, you know, most leagues are still using the newsletter format. Some leagues are moving to a content management newsletter system called like MailChimp or Constant Contact or Vertical Response. And some of those have a feature where you open the newsletter, you know, you've input it in their system. When you get it, you open up your email and you see this newsletter, and there's a little tiny message at the top that says view in browser, which gives you a handy dandy link that you could easily place on your website without the download, upload, or having to deal with a PDF. So I just want to throw those ideas out there for you so that you can think more about your short and long-term needs for PDFs. But again, you know, they're just not accessible in the way that we really want the site to be for people. And although we've done this wonderful search component of the PDFs, it's still not as good as, you know, a traditional search for content that shows up on a page. And to that end, because we've had so many questions about PDFs, we are developing a webinar to talk about, you know, the title of which will be What to Do Instead of a PDF. So we recognize that this is a challenge and know that we are trying to balance both cost, budget, and accessibility to make sure that we're sending people in the right direction for best practices and modern web design. So with that said, I would just, if you have additional questions about PDFs, feel free to email me. I'm happy to tell you what some other options that leagues are doing and different ways around it that they're working on. So I'm happy to talk further about that. But I hope that gives you a little bit of an inspiration on what to do with your hard, you know, all this content you've worked so hard on to make sure that it actually gets before the people you want to read it. I've quieted everyone.
And we get Bruce. Let me just add, we understand that you're not just talking about future newsletters. You're also talking about, an archive that you're not going to move to non-PDF content.
Well,
we totally get that.
The part that maybe you guys are concentrated about making some cool thing for the future, and I'm stuck with a past that I want to move into the future without spending a hell of a lot of time doing it.
Which is why, to your point at the beginning, it sounds like we're talking out of both sides of our mouths, because we're trying to give you the path for the future, but we're also trying to make sure that, at least at a base level, the tools that you need are there for stuff that's historical.
There's a related problem is that a large percentage of our members, which is probably true throughout the whole country, but the large percent of our members are in their 80s. And trying to introduce them a totally new system that looks very different than the old one doesn't seem like a really good idea. So I'd like to make the system, at least at the moment, look from their point of view very similar to what they saw before. And so that leads me down a lot of these same paths, which are not the same way. You're looking towards the future and I'm stuck in the past. And that's similar. I have another related question having to do with the calendar. I tried to play with adding a couple of things to make it look like our old calendar, and it seems like the calendar page that you have on there wants to also display the damn things on the front page, when I only wanted to keep them on the calendar page like our old system did.
Okay, so that's an option that you have. There is, I will show you in the documentation where there's an item on this. So I'm just going to do search for sticky. Here it is. So there's this documentation page here, publishing options, sticky and promoted to front, so that you know what to search for after this. But I will show you right now as well. So all of your content, including your events, down at the bottom under publishing options, there's these two items right here, sticky at top of list and promoted to front page. Promoted to front page means that it will be featured on the front page of your league site. And sticky at top of list means that it will disregard the specified sort order of content that's listed. So for the front page, the sort order is most recent items go to the top. But anything that's sticky will rise above that regardless of the date that it was posted. So if you post something in October, but that item that you posted in October needs to be at the top, then you tell it that it's sticky and it'll still appear above something that's been posted in January 2018. So even though the January 2018 item is newer.
So the Loo system, when you had a very specific design for the calendar page, and it ordered them automatically by the date and things like that. And it had a number of other features, one of which, if you give the location, if you give the full location with a zip number, that would automatically tag it to a link to Google Maps. So
that actually does happen on this system as well. So I was just talking about the front page right there. So promoted to front is what determines if it goes to the front page or not. So if you uncheck that, then it will not show on the front page. So to your question about the calendar page itself and the Google Map and all of that, so the calendar page displays differently. The sort order of items on the calendar page is the most recent upcoming event first, and then in order from the most recent one on. So if I add a bunch of events, and I don't have a bunch of events in here right now, but let's go ahead and add an event. I'll just add a couple really quickly. One, and then I'll set that event to January 9th. We'll make it an all-day event. And then I'll put in a location. I need an address that's not my personal address. Okay, so since this is a recorded webinar that will be publicly available. 5814. Okay, so I can put in the address here, And all right, so I've set the date, I've put in an address. I can put in a body or an image if I want to. And
By the way, in the body, can I put an embedded HTML in that with the, or will it ignore
you
that?
can, but if you put embedded HTML into the body, you need to change the input format, the text format, to full HTML. And that will get rid of the visual editor. So that's why you want to use the paragraph technique rather than placing that embed code into the body. All right, so I just created an event with the date. There's an add to calendar for that event. So if I want to add it to my Google Calendar, I can do that here. And because I put in the full address, there's a link to Google Maps right here. And if I go to the calendar page, that event shows up right here. Now, if I create a new event, it will show up in order of the events, in date order. So event example 2, and we'll just put that after the one that I just created. Let's add some text here. And then now I'm publishing these because I want them to show up in the list of events on the calendar. They won't show up until they're published. So now, if I go here, you'll see that the January 9th one shows up first, and then the January 24th one shows up second. So the event location and that Google Maps link only shows up currently on the event page itself. And that actually is a change based on user feedback. We did have the location showing up initially, and we had users telling us that they didn't want the location showing up, so we removed it. If enough people say they want the location back, then we can put it back.
But it will appear on the calendar page, it'll show the full thing, right?
It shows up on the event page itself, yes.
And Rain, it is past 5 o'clock, so I am going to have to ask us all to finish up our call and our webinar right now. And to keep in mind, this will be recorded, and you will receive a link to this recording in about a day, about 24 hours. It will send that out to you, and we will also post it on the web page.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
I just wanted to say I want to go live in a few days. So do I just send you an email?
Send me an email, and we will get that done for you tomorrow.
Okay, so I'll probably be back to the next webinar too. I have a couple other questions.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone very much for being here, and feel free to email us anytime with any questions. And we have another session coming up at the end of the month, so you're welcome to sign up for that one as well. And we really appreciate your feedback and your patience as we launch our MyLeague online sites. Rain, did you have anything else you wanted to add today?
Just thank you very much for bringing up some great questions and great notes. And we did take some notes, and we'll be folding those in as we can. Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.